I think we've had a few people maybe abducted out of the crowd today by some UFOs. You may not have seen them, but we've got Alien Dave here, who's a real expert on this stuff, and boy, does he have some interesting stories. And so, Alien Dave, if you'd come up and spend a few minutes, if you don't mind, and tell us a couple of your... He was just beamed down. Anyway, he's got some great stories. We might as well hear it, because the basin is a hot spot in the world, if you don't know that, for UFOs and that, and I could tell you some stories on that too, but Alien Dave knows way more than I do about this stuff. So go ahead with a few minutes and share a couple stories with us, if you wouldn't mind.
Okay.
Alien Dave, let's give him a hand.
A lot of you might know me from the website, or maybe you've seen me on TV, but I would like to share tonight, because we are near Moon Lake. I'd like to share my Bigfoot experience that I've had here in Moon Lake when I was 17. We were camping at Moon Lake for about a week, and on day 2, we decided to hike up to the Brown Duck and do some fly fishing. So we left early in the morning, and we hiked up the trail, did our fishing, and about 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, we headed back down the mountain. And on the way back down, there's like there's a crossing there with a cable cart. And as soon as we got past that, we started hearing off to our right side this kind of grunt bark type thing, and we were just, you know, like, what is that? And we'd walk a little bit farther and we'd hear it again, and it was just really odd. And we heard it maybe 4 or 5 times coming down the trail, and then we noticed this pack train coming up with horses and mules, and they had a couple dogs with them. And we noticed the dogs were looking that way the whole time they were walking up. They were just staring in that direction as they were walking up. And we kind of noticed that, and we mentioned it to each other. We said, did you notice the dogs were looking at the same way that we've been hearing this noise? And so it was just kind of one of those things you just kind of notice, but kind of throw it in the back of your mind. And so we just kept walking, but as soon as we couldn't hear the horses anymore, we heard that bark like grunt again, and then we heard a big twig break or big branch break. And so we looked over there, and as you know, if you've ever been up in that area, it's pretty thick, and so you can't see back very far. And so we kind of looked that way after seeing or hearing that branch break, and we seen 2 Bigfoot just over this little rise, walking back into the woods. So all we seen was like mid-back up, but one was bigger than the other. The tall one was like a blackish brown, and the smaller one was kind of reddish. And it was no neck. You could see the muscles moving and stuff as the sun was coming through the trees, and we watched it for maybe, I don't know, 8, 9 seconds. And then we looked at each other, and we were like, did you, of course, did you just see that? I mean, do you just see what I seen? And so we were like, yeah. And so we kind of just started huffing down the mountain real quick, because we didn't want to mess with it. And the odd thing was, we were there at Moon Lake for another 5 days, and that night when we got back down into camp, the ranger came up and was trying to warn us about bears in the area, to keep your food, tucked away, and any fish parts or anything like that, put it in the garbage and all that. And we never mentioned it to the ranger. We never mentioned it to the family that we were staying with, and our friends, and the whole 5 days that we were there, we never mentioned that to anybody. And I thought that was really weird looking back on it. But about 10 years or 12 years later, I had hooked up with this friend that we went hiking with, and it brought back the memory of that encounter. And I said, do you remember the time we were at Moon Lake and we seen Bigfoot? And he says, yes. And what was really weird is I've never told anybody about that. And I thought, well, neither have I. Isn't that just strange? You know, that we never mentioned it to anybody in camp. We never mentioned it to our families. When we got home, we never mentioned it for 10, 12 years until we met each other again and we had that memory. And so what I thought was odd too is we used to hold monthly UFO meetings with Marley Spenlove in Salt Lake for MUFON. We kind of shared meetings with them, and we would have speakers come in. And one time we had a Indian chief come in from the Navajo Nation, and he was speaking on Bigfoot. And he was telling us that there was like 3 different types of Bigfoot, and one of these Bigfoot makes you forget. And I thought that was really odd. And I says, well, what do you mean it makes you forget? And he says, well, they're telepathic, and if you see them, they can kind of put that in your mind just to, you know, forget about it. And I says, well, that's kind of what happened to us up at Moon Lake. I thought, you know, it's like just kind of strange. And then another incident that I had with Bigfoot was out in the West Desert, because I am always out in the West Desert looking for UFOs with Dugway, Area 52 area. And we had gotten contacted by a lady who's riding horses and stuff out there, and she was coming across all these Bigfoot track, which I thought was really strange being out in the desert. So I was super interested in this, and she had some really good photographs and stuff. So we went to the area and we started looking around, and right away we started finding track, and not just big track, but little track, just all sorts of size track out there. So we started GPSing the tracks, and we feed it into a topo map program on the computer, and when we put in all the data, we was like, well, look, there's a trail. And so we went back and we used the GPS, and we was like, oh yeah, there is a trail. And we started finding track all along this trail, and it led up to this vantage point, and it wasn't really even the highest vantage point around. It was just a kind of a good location to see the entrance to the canyon up there. And we noticed that the track would come all up one way, and they would stand in one direction and then go back down the same way they came. So we started doing experiments, and we'd, you know, rake it clean, and we'd leave an apple or some marbles or something to try to see if it might get taken. And over the months that we were out there at that first season, nothing got taken, but there was always new track. And we would stand there and we was like, okay, what are they looking at? Because they're all facing one direction. And the only thing that's out there is Dugway and the depot. And so we're like, are they watching Dugway too? I mean, are they watching the UFOs? Or what is the purpose of them coming up here and doing this? And so we kept that location, well, it's still secret, but we keep it pretty secret, because we're finding out that they're using that area a certain time of year, and then they migrate south. And so a year and a half or so has gone by, and the lady had contacted me and said, you know, how's the investigation going? And we told her, you know, we have a couple independent researchers out there that are keeping the secret, that are doing their own thing. It was a former bounty hunter and a former retired sheriff from Tooele. And we all kind of came to the same conclusion that there was some kind of family unit living out there at a certain time of year. But to make a long story short, the lady had called me about a year and a half after we started the investigation. She says, have you ever went out there at night? And I says, why would I do that? And she says, well, you might just see something if you do that, because that's when I have the most experiences out there as far as a visual sighting. So about 3 days later, I had got in the Blazer and went out there, and I got there just as the sun was going down. It was just starting to get dark. And I parked in my usual spot, and I got my camera equipment together, and as soon as I stepped out of the Blazer, I heard in my head, over here. And it wasn't like I looked around, I looked right at it. And it was up on the hill up by the cemetery, and it was rocking back and forth like, here I am. And it did that for like 3-4 seconds, and it knew I seen it, and then it went down on all fours and was gone. And I thought to myself, that's the same type of thing that this chief was saying, that the Bigfoot's telepathic and would make you forget, or in this case, it wanted me to see it for some strange reason, but I wasn't going to go up there after I seen it because it was getting dark, and of course I was unarmed, but I just thought I would share that experience because I'm so close to Moon Lake here, and when I was at 17, that was one of the things that stuck with me for my entire life, more or less, was that sighting of Bigfoot at Moon Lake. But I have tons of stories. If anybody wants to talk to me afterwards about UFOs, about Space Wolf Research or Skinwalker Ranch. We do own property next to Skinwalker Ranch now called Space Wolf Research. We're up on the hill. It's the southern vantage point, so we actually have a better view of Skinwalker Ranch than they do. And we've found some pretty interesting things there over the years and had some crazy experiences there too, but I'm going to let it go to someone else now, and hit me up tomorrow or something. I'll be around.